On Christmas Eve, while the snow outside piled against the windows like a warning, I should have listened 2 years ago. I sat in my parents' living room, the same living room where I had celebrated every childhood holiday, where we used to drink hot cocoa, unwrap presents, and pretend that we were the perfect American family. Except tonight, the atmosphere was different, cold, brittle, and humming with an energy I couldn't name yet. My mother had insisted I come early because she had important family matters to discuss. My father was sitting upright, his hands folded like a man preparing to deliver a verdict. My older brother, Josh, leaned back confidently. Wearing the smug smirk he saves only 4 moments when he thinks he's already won. His wife kept glancing at me like I was an inconvenience that crashed their private celebration. I should have known something was coming, but nothing prepared me for the moment. My dad cleared his throat and said, "We need to talk about the will." Not exactly the Christmas tradition I had hoped for. I blinked, confused, because as far as I knew, nothing about the will had ever been up for discussion, especially not while the Christmas tree glowed in the corner and my mother's famous cinnamon candles burned on the table. My father didn't hesitate. "We've decided to update the estate. Everything will be going to your brother. We think it's for the best." At first I thought it was a dark joke, some twisted holiday prank, but the look in their eyes wasn't joking. It was final, rehearsed, and heartlessly calm. My mom added, "You don't need it. Josh has a family to support you. Well, you're doing fine on your own, doing fine." I nearly laughed. I had spent the last 5 years freelancing, working insane hours to keep myself afloat without ever asking them for a dime, while Josh lived off their generosity. Borrowed money he never paid back, and got extra loans every time he and his wife overspent on vacations they couldn't afford. But that wasn't the part that cut me open. It was the way they looked at me like I was an outsider at their table. Like I didn't belong, like all the memories I had with them were suddenly optional. My father slid a folded document across the table. "We'd like you to sign this acknowledgement. It just states you're aware of the update and that you won't contest it." I stared at the paper, my heartbeat pounding so loud I could barely hear them anymore. I looked at my brother, who leaned forward and said, "It's not personal, it's just logical. I have responsibilities, you don't." Responsibilities. As if my existence lacked weight, purpose, or value, simply because I wasn't married with kids. I felt the humiliation crawl under my skin as the realization settled. They had already decided I didn't matter. I set the paper down slowly. "So, that's it. After everything. After all these years." My mother sighed, annoyed that I didn't immediately comply. "Please don't make this dramatic. You'll get over it." That was the breaking point. The moment something inside me snapped, not with anger, but with clarity. I stood up, nodded politely, and said, "Thank you for letting me know." My father exhaled in relief, thinking I had accepted it. My brother smirked. My mother smiled like she had diffused a minor inconvenience. They had no idea that in that moment, I mentally crossed a line I could never uncross. I walked out of that house with my heartbeat calm, my mind quiet, and my decision already forming like ice crystallizing under pressure. If they wanted to cut me out of their family for convenience, then fine, I could play along. But Christmas is about giving, right? And I suddenly knew exactly what I wanted to give them. The unexpected gift they never saw coming. For years, my parents assumed I was struggling financially because I never flaunted anything. They saw my old car, my modest apartment, my quiet lifestyle, and they thought I was barely scraping by. They didn't know I had been building a consulting business behind the scenes, working with international clients, landing contracts in silence, and quietly earning more in a year than Josh and his wife combined in 3. They didn't know I had bought property under an LLC for tax benefits, invested early in a tech startup that blew up, and saved more than they had in their entire retirement accounts. They didn't know because I never told them. I didn't need praise. I didn't need validation. I didn't need their approval. But that night, standing outside in the cold, the snow crunching under my boots, I realized something important. My silence, which once protected my peace, could now expose their hypocrisy. So I went home, opened my laptop, and began preparing the gift that would reshape every relationship in that family forever. A gift they would open the next morning. A gift that said, "You cut me out of your future, so I'll show you what you just threw away." And when the sun rose on Christmas Day, they finally understood. When Christmas morning arrived, I woke up before the sun, not because of excitement or holiday spirit, but because my mind was razor sharp with purpose in a way it hadn't been in years. The air in my apartment was cold, but my focus burned hot. I brewed a cup of coffee, sat at my desk, and opened the email draft I had finished around 3 a.m. The unexpected gift wrapped not in ribbon, but in truth. It wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was a mirror, perfectly angled so they could finally see themselves. All I had to do was hit send. But before I did, I read through everything one more time. The email wasn't angry or insulting. That would have been too easy, too dismissible. Instead, it was polite, painfully polite, which made every sentence land like a scalpel. I wrote how grateful I was for being informed about the will update. I expressed understanding for their decision. After all, Josh had responsibilities that I apparently didn't. Then came the part that mattered. In meticulous detail, I outlined the list of assets I had quietly accumulated over the past 5 years. The consulting firm I owned under a neutral business name, the investment portfolio I had built from scratch, the duplex I purchased and rented out for passive income, the early investment in a tech startup that had exploded in valuation. I even attached financial statements, not to brag, but to make sure the numbers were undeniable. And then I added the final paragraph, the one designed to shatter their narrative. I appreciate that you believed I didn't need support. You were right, I never did. But I've realized something important. Family is not about inheritance, blood, or tradition. It's about respect. So I'll step back completely from any future financial discussions or expectations. Consider this my acknowledgement, a perfect gift. Silence and distance wrapped in absolute truth. But the real twist was the last attachment, a donation receipt. The money I was originally planning to give my parents for Christmas, a considerable sum, had instead gone to a family shelter program under my mother's maiden name. A program she passionately supported but never contributed to financially, always saying she wished she could help more. One donated in her honor, and added in the email, "Since you believe I'm good on my own, I wanted to pay forward the generosity I never needed." Then I hit send. The email flew off into the digital void with a satisfying finality, and I sat back, sipping my coffee, as the sun slowly rose, painting the world in pale winter gold. I expected the silence to last a few hours. It lasted 7 minutes. My phone buzzed with a call from my mother, then another, then my father, then a string of messages from my brother ranging from "What the hell is this?" to "Call Dad now" to "Are you out of your mind?" I ignored all of them. The ringing was almost musical. Eventually, my father sent a calm, formal text, a tone he only used when he realized he no longer had control of a situation. "We need to talk. There appears to be some misunderstanding." Misunderstanding, that word nearly made me laugh. They understood perfectly. They just didn't like the story now that I'd rewritten my role in it. I left my phone buzzing on the couch, got dressed, and drove to my favorite diner, the one I used to beg them to take me to when I was a kid, the one they always said was too cheap or too small. I sat in a corner booth, ordered pancakes, and for the first time in years, I felt light, free. By the time I finished eating, 3 voicemails had come in. The first was my mother crying, the second was my father trying to sound calm but failing, and the third was Josh, fuming because he realized what my email implied. I didn't need anything from the family, but the family definitely needed something from me, and that terrified them, because suddenly the power dynamic they had relied on for years, the assumption that I was the dependent one, flipped so fast it nearly snapped. I blocked all of them for the rest of the day. Christmas passed quietly. No drama, no arguments, no forcing myself to smile at people who didn't respect me. The next morning, however, my father showed up at my apartment building. He buzzed my intercom repeatedly until I finally answered. "We need to talk," he said, voice tight. "Not today," I replied. "Then when you stop treating me like a backup plan you don't need until you suddenly realize you do." He was silent for a long moment. Then he said the one thing I thought I'd never hear from him: "We made a mistake." But I wasn't the same person I'd been 2 days earlier. I wasn't begging for their approval. I didn't need their apology to breathe. So I said, "Maybe, but mistakes have consequences." I hung up. The buzzing didn't come again. Over the next 2 weeks, the fallout within the family spread like wildfire. My cousin called me saying my brother had a meltdown at a family dinner because everyone was asking why I was suddenly worth so much. My aunt texted me asking if the will change was true. My mother sent a long email apologizing in circles without ever admitting the truth. They cut me out not because they thought I didn't need the money, but because they thought I didn't deserve it. They thought I didn't measure up. They thought I was a convenient cut. But the real earthquake hit when I received a PDF document by email at midnight, an updated will draft, reversing everything, giving me an equal share. A message from my father followed. Let's talk. I stared at the document for a long time, not because I wanted the money, but because I finally understood what my unexpected gift had done. It forced them to confront who they were without the illusion of superiority. It forced them to look at the child they dismissed and see the adult they underestimated. But they still didn't understand the most important part. I wasn't doing any of this for inheritance. I didn't care about their assets. I cared about respect. And that was something they still hadn't given me. So I closed the email, shut off my laptop, and went to bed. Their panic was not my problem. Their guilt was not my responsibility. And the decision I would make next, whether to forgive them or walk away for good, would be a choice entirely on my terms. For the first time in my life, I held the pen that wrote the family narrative, and I wasn't planning to write the ending they expected. In the days that followed, something shifted in the air around my life, not dramatically, not like a thunderstorm crashing through the walls, but quietly, like the slow, deliberate turning of a lock I never realized had been closed on me for years. I woke up each morning lighter, not because the situation with my family was resolved, but because for the first time, I wasn't waiting for their approval, their acknowledgement, or their validation. The silence between us wasn't a punishment anymore. It was space, life-giving, peaceful space where I could finally breathe, without feeling like every breath needed to be justified. I focused on my work, attended meetings, signed a new contract, and kept moving forward. Meanwhile, my family seemed to be crumbling under the weight of their own decisions. My aunt messaged again, this time telling me that my father had been unusually quiet at gatherings. My mother had been crying often, and Josh had been snapping at everyone because he suddenly felt pressured by the rest of the relatives, asking why he thought he deserved the entire inheritance. The irony was delicious. He had no problem with the will until he learned what I was worth, and then suddenly the will was unfair. But I didn't respond to any of their messages. I didn't even open the long apology letters that arrived in my mailbox. I simply stacked them on my coffee table like unread chapters from a book I no longer cared to finish. One night, about a week after Christmas, I got a knock on my door just past 10 p.m. I hesitated, half expecting some late delivery, half expecting exactly what it was. My brother, Josh, stood there, shoulders hunched, eyes restless, hands shoved into his jacket pockets like a kid caught doing something he finally regretted. Can we talk? He asked. Not demanded, not assumed. That alone showed how desperate he was. I stepped aside only because I wanted to hear what he came to say, not because he deserved the space. He walked inside, glanced around my apartment, the minimal furnishings, the clean lines, the calm atmosphere, and I could tell he was cataloging details he never knew about my life because he'd never cared to look. Mom and Dad are losing it, he said immediately, like I should feel sympathy. Good, I said simply. His jaw tightened. You didn't have to send that email. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't have to. They cut me out of the will on Christmas Eve and expected me to smile about it. I owed them an acknowledgement. That's what they asked for. He let out a frustrated breath and ran a hand through his hair. Look, I get that it hurt, but you blindsided everyone. I leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. They blindsided me. Josh, I didn't ask for any of this. He opened his mouth to argue, then shut it. For the first time in our lives, he didn't have a comeback ready. Instead, he sank into the chair near my kitchen table and rubbed his forehead. I didn't know you had all that money, he said quietly. Yeah, I replied, because I didn't feel the need to brag about it. His shoulders slumped. I thought you were struggling. You thought, I corrected. You never asked. He looked up at me then, something raw flickering in his expression. Shame. I'm not good with this, he admitted, talking about feelings, but I know you're angry, and I know I've been kind of a jerk my whole life. Kind of was an understatement, but I let him continue. When Mom and Dad said they were giving everything to me, I thought it made sense. I thought you'd be fine. What? I asked. Because I didn't need it, or because you didn't think I deserved it? That question hung in the air like a blade. He swallowed hard. Because I always thought they loved me more. It was the closest he had ever come to an admission of our family's dynamic. The unspoken truth we both lived under like a shadow stretching across decades, the golden child and the independent one. The favored and the forgotten. The one who could do no wrong and the one who was always fine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said the words I never expected from him. I don't want the inheritance without you in it. It feels dirty. I stared at him, weighing the sincerity in his voice. It wasn't perfect, but it was real in a way I had never seen from him. So what do you want from me? I asked finally. To forgive us. He shook his head. No, I want you to talk to Mom and Dad. At least hear them out. I could have slammed that door shut, metaphorically and literally. But something inside me paused, not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I wanted closure on my terms. One conversation, I said. Then I decide where this goes. He nodded, relieved. I'll tell them. The next evening, my parents invited me to dinner, not at their house, but at a quiet restaurant halfway between us. Neutral territory. Smart choice. They were already seated when I arrived. My mother looked smaller somehow, her usual composure replaced with anxious energy. My father looked older, his confidence carved away. When I sat down, neither spoke at first. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable, until finally my father cleared his throat. We owe you an apology, he said, his voice subdued. We handled things poorly, very poorly. My mother nodded, tears already building. We didn't think. We didn't consider how it would feel. We just assumed. You assumed. I echoed. Assumed I didn't need anything. Assumed I didn't matter as much. Assumed I'd accept being an afterthought. My mother covered her mouth with her hand. My father lowered his gaze. We were wrong, he said. And we're sorry. There was something painful and strangely human in seeing my father, a man who had built his identity on being right, say those words. But apologies, I learned long ago, are not enough. You didn't just update a will, I said. You made a decision that reflected exactly what you thought of me. That's not true, my mother whispered. You know we love you. Do I asked. Because love isn't something you keep on a shelf and dust off when it's convenient. My father swallowed hard. What can we do to fix it? This and that was the moment I realized the power had shifted entirely. Not because of money. Not because of status. But because I no longer needed anything from them. Not their approval. Not their inheritance. Not their apologies. I finally said the words that had been buried inside me for years. I'll think about it, but understand, this any relationship we rebuild will be on my terms, not yours. My mother nodded desperately. My father looked relieved but terrified. We talked for another hour, slowly, awkwardly, painfully. It wasn't healing yet, but it was the beginning of something different, something honest. When I left the restaurant, stepping into the cold night air, I felt something I hadn't felt since childhood: control over my own story. What they didn't know was that my decision, the real decision, was still forming quietly inside me. And it wasn't about inheritance. It was about rewriting the role I played in their lives forever. In the week that followed that tense dinner, the air around my family shifted in a way that was almost unsettling. They reached out more in those 7 days than they had in the last 7 years combined, as if desperately trying to patch cracks in a foundation they had ignored until it nearly collapsed. My mother sent photos of old family albums, little text messages like "saw this" and "thought of you," which would have meant something once, but now felt like someone placing bandages on a wound they inflicted themselves. My father sent updates about things he never bothered discussing with me: before appointments, home repairs, small details of his day, as if trying to rebuild familiarity by force. Josh called twice, then 3 times, then daily, as if afraid that if he didn't keep the connection alive, I might disappear again, and this time for good, and maybe I would. Because that week, I realized something profound. Stepping away from them had given me the clearest view of our past I'd ever had. I could see every moment they brushed me aside, every time they made excuses for Josh, every sacrifice I made that went unnoticed, every milestone they downplayed, every achievement they attributed to luck instead of effort. It wasn't bitterness, it was clarity. They weren't bad people. They were people who convinced themselves I didn't need them, because it made life easier for them. And now they were terrified of losing me because I had shown them the truth. I didn't need them, but they needed me. Still, I wasn't interested in jumping back into their lives just because they finally realized my worth. I needed to decide what role, if any, I wanted to play going forward. And that was when the call came that changed everything again. It was late Thursday night, around 11 p.m., when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I almost let it ring out, but something, intuition, fate, whatever, made me answer. Hello. There was a moment of static before I heard a voice I hadn't expected. My uncle, Mark. He had always been the neutral one in the family, the man who stayed out of drama, who lived out of state and only visited on holidays now and then. I heard about what happened, he said in a low voice. No introduction, no small talk, just straight into it. I'm guessing the whole family knows by now, I said flatly. They do, he replied, but that's not why I'm calling. Something in his tone made me sit up straighter. It wasn't pity or gossip, it was something heavier. Your dad told me they cut you out of the will, he continued, and that they tried to reverse it after your email. I said nothing. Let him continue. I want you to know something, he said, something your parents were never going to tell you. And then he dropped the truth like a stone thrown into deep water. Years ago, long before I realized they viewed me differently, my father had taken out a business loan he couldn't repay. The only reason he didn't lose everything was because my uncle stepped in and bailed him out, quietly, discreetly, family helping family. But here was the real blow. My father promised to pay him back by adjusting the will, meaning leaving everything to Josh, eventually, because they assumed I would be fine on my own. It wasn't just favoritism, it was leverage, a debt paid using me as the currency. I felt my stomach twist. So they cut me out, I said slowly, to repay a loan, to justify keeping things simple, my uncle corrected. They convinced themselves it made sense. But I want you to know, I never asked for that. I never agreed to it. I told your father years ago to forget the debt and move on. My pulse thudded in my ears. Everything suddenly snapped into place, like a puzzle locking into its final form. My parents' decision hadn't been accidental or emotional, it had been planned, years in advance, built on a lie that they fed themselves until they believed it. They hadn't cut me out because I was independent. They had cut me out because it was convenient. My uncle continued quietly. I only found out recently that they followed through with it. And when I confronted your father, he tried to justify it by saying you wouldn't care because you were doing fine. My throat burned with a mix of anger and disbelief. He didn't even know, I said. He didn't ask. He didn't want to know. Exactly, my uncle said. Your father doesn't like difficult truths. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Why are you telling me this? I asked. My uncle sighed. Because you deserve honesty, and because your parents are acting like they're the victims of your email, but they're not. They made a choice years ago that hurt you, long before Christmas Eve. A long silence stretched between us. So what now? I finally asked. My uncle paused, then said, that's up to you, but don't rebuild a relationship with them without knowing the whole truth. When I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, processing, rewinding, reevaluating every memory with the new information, and when I finally picked up my phone again, there were unread messages from my mother and father. My mother had sent pictures of an ornament I made in kindergarten. My father had sent, whenever you're ready to talk again, I'm here. All these messages meant to tug at my heart, pull me back in. But now I knew they weren't just trying to rebuild, they were trying to rewrite history. I wasn't angry, I was done with anger. What I felt now was certainty. I knew what I had to do next. The next morning, I sent a group message to my parents and Josh. We need to meet, all of us, tomorrow. When I pressed send, I felt a calm settle over me. This time, they wouldn't be dictating the terms. This time, they wouldn't decide who held power. This time, every truth was coming to the table, and none of us would leave unchanged. The next day arrived with a cold, biting wind that cut through the air like something alive, something warning, something whispering that once I stepped into this confrontation, there would be no going back, no pretending, no softening, no smoothing over the truth the way families often do when the reality is too ugly to name. I woke early, not from anxiety but from clarity. The message I sent last night had been simple, but the meaning behind it was undeniable. This time, they would not avoid the truth by drowning it in guilt, nostalgia, or sentimental memories meant to distract me. This time, we were going to drag everything into the light. Whether they were ready or not, we agreed to meet at my father's office, a place my family always regarded with reverence, where deals were signed, where reputations were built, where every wall screamed authority. It was deliberate on my part, not neutral territory, not their home where they could hide behind familiarity. I wanted them somewhere uncomfortable, somewhere that reminded them of the power they had always used as leverage. But today that power wouldn't belong to them. When I walked into the building, the receptionist gave me a nervous smile. clearly already informed that the family was meeting privately. My father hated internal conflict publicly, so the fact that we were doing this here told me he was already scrambling, already worried about optics, already trying to maintain the illusion of control. Good, let him sweat. When I stepped into the private conference room, all three of them were already seated. My father at the head of the table, my mother beside him clutching tissues, Josh on the opposite side, leg bouncing, eyes darting toward the door, as if unsure whether to run or face what was coming. I didn't sit immediately. I placed my phone on the table, deliberately, watching their eyes follow the movement. Before we start, I said evenly, I want to make one thing clear. We are not here to discuss the will. We're not negotiating anything. I don't want your money. I never did. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother's shoulders sagged with a visible exhale. Josh watched me like he expected me to flip the table. Then what are we here for? My father asked, attempting calm that didn't reach his eyes. The truth, I said. All of it. A ripple of confusion passed through them. They weren't expecting that. Maybe they thought I wanted another apology. Maybe they thought I wanted reassurance. Maybe they thought I wanted them to fight for me to return to the family. They had no idea what was coming. I sat down finally, folded my hands on the table, and looked directly at my father. Uncle Mark called me. The reaction was instant. My father's expression froze. My mother stiffened, and Josh blinked like someone had snapped fingers in front of his face. What did he say? My father asked slowly, voice tight. He told me about the loan you took years ago, I said, and how you promised to make it right by adjusting the will. My mother gasped softly. My father's jaw clenched. Josh looked between them. Lost. He also told me he didn't want repayment, and he never agreed to being compensated through inheritance decisions. I added, so let me ask you directly, did you cut me out of the will because you thought I didn't need it, or because it cleared a debt you didn't want to acknowledge? The room went dead silent. My father opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed, then finally said, it wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I pressed. He rubbed his forehead. We were trying to simplify things. You were doing well, and you didn't know I was doing well. I interrupted sharply. You didn't ask. You assumed, because assuming made it easier to justify giving everything to Josh. My mother started to cry quietly then, the kind of trembling sob meant to elicit sympathy, but it didn't pierce me this time. It sounded distant, like background noise in a room where the real conversation was happening between me and my father. It was never meant to hurt you, my father insisted. It was meant to settle things cleanly, at my expense. He hesitated. It was brief, but it was enough. At your expense, I repeated, my voice steady, even as the words hammered through the air. You didn't want to deal with your own financial mistakes, so you solved it by cutting out the child you thought would stay quiet. His shoulders fell then, like the facade finally cracked. My mother reached for his hand. Josh looked horrified. Dad, is that true? Josh whispered. My father didn't answer. Not verbally, but the silence was confirmation. You thought I would accept it because I always have. I continued. You thought I would shrug it off, stay out of the way, and let the golden child take everything because that was the role you all wrote for me years ago. My voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. It was cold, surgical, precise. You weren't just wrong, I said. You were cruel. My mother's sob turned into a shaky inhale. We made a mistake, she choked out. A big one. We never should have. You didn't make a mistake, I said quietly. You made a decision. And the weight of that distinction hit all of them at once. My father leaned forward then, elbows on the table, hands clasped, his voice hoarse. I'm ashamed, he said. And for the first time in my life, I believed him. But shame wasn't enough. I'm not here to fix you, I said. I'm not here to restore your family image. I'm here to redraw boundaries you've crossed for years. My mother wiped her eyes. What does that mean? It means, I said, that from now on, I decide how much space you get in my life. Josh swallowed. How much space? Less, I said simply. A lot less. My father closed his eyes like the words physically hit him. I'm willing to try, he said, to change, to rebuild, and maybe that will happen, I replied. But it won't happen through guilt or pressure or pretending the past didn't happen. If we rebuild, it will be slow, it will be earned, and it will happen on my terms, not yours. The room stayed silent as the truth settled heavy on their shoulders. Then, I delivered the final blow not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. I don't want the inheritance, not now, not ever. Remove me from the will completely. All three of them flinched. My mother shook her head. No, you don't mean that. I do, I said. I don't want something you use to measure my worth. My father's voice cracked. Then what do you want? I stood slowly, picking up my phone. Respect, distance, and time. They stared at me as if watching someone they thought they knew transform into a stranger in front of them. Maybe I had. Maybe I needed to. At the door, I paused and looked back at them. The truth's on the table now. Whether you grow from it is up to you. Then I walked out, leaving them sitting in the conference room, broken, quiet, and finally confronting the consequences of their own choices. And for the first time in my life, the silence felt like freedom. I walked into my parents' house the next morning, with the kind of calm that only comes when you've reached the point of no return. The living room was still a mess of torn wrapping, paper half-eaten cookies, and the echo of last night's chaos. My parents looked up from the dining table, clearly not expecting me. My mother's face twisted, first annoyance, then confusion. My father just exhaled like he was already tired of the conversation he assumed I came to have. But I didn't come to argue. I didn't come to beg. I came to finish what Christmas Eve had started. My brother and his wife were whispering on the couch, pretending not to eavesdrop, but their eyes kept darting at me like I was some outsider trespassing in a house I'd lived in my whole life. I didn't sit. I didn't take off my coat. I simply said, I'm here to deliver my last gift. My mother scoffed, saying no gift from me could fix what I did by ruining Christmas. I didn't react. I placed an envelope on the table, thick sealed, and heavy with more weight than money could ever hold. My father slid it toward himself, opened it, and the moment he started reading, his face strained. The room went completely silent. My mother snatched the papers from him, skimmed them, and gasped dramatically, "What is this supposed to mean?" Finally sat, but only so I could look each of them directly in the eyes as everything unraveled. "It's the paperwork," I said slowly, confirming that the deed transfer is complete. "The house, this house, the one you assumed would go to my brother, the one you thought you could dangle over my head to control me." My brother stood so fast the couch made a cracking noise. "You're lying," he snapped. But he knew I wasn't. My parents looked at the documents, again official stamps, signatures, dates, everything airtight. They knew the truth when they saw it. Last year, when I helped them refinance some of their loans, they unknowingly gave me partial ownership of the property. They were careless. I was patient. And once they decided to cut me out of their will, I decided to finalize what was already legally in motion. "I don't want your money," I said, "but you don't get to humiliate me while assuming everything you own is guaranteed to go exactly where you want it. Because now, it doesn't." My mother slammed the papers onto the table. My father started lecturing me about family respect and tradition and filial duty. All the things they only brought up when I wasn't obedient enough. I reminded them, "You're the ones who cut me out. I'm simply returning the energy." My brother demanded that I fix this, as if I had made some childish mistake. They all talked over one another, voices rising like a storm, desperate to drown me out. But I wasn't drowning. Not anymore. I stood again, letting them spiral. "You wanted to teach me a lesson," I said quietly, "but you forgot I grew up learning how to survive your lessons." I told them I wasn't evicting them, I wasn't kicking them out, I wasn't taking anything away from them the way they tried to take everything from me. I was simply putting my boundaries in writing, boundaries they would now be legally required to respect. "You cut me out," I repeated, so I stepped out. And then I gave them my true gift: distance, peace, freedom from their manipulation, their guilt games, their emotional PUPPETEERING. As I walked out of the house for the last time, my mother shouting my name, my father demanding I come back, my brother cursing under his breath, I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel like the villain they always tried to cast me as. I only felt like letting go was the real inheritance I had been missing all along. Their voices were still echoing behind me when I closed the door. But for the first time, they didn't follow me. And for the first time, I didn't look back.